Thank you everyone for joining and happy World Asthma Day. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the beautiful lands on which we're all meeting today across our nation. I'm joining from Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and future. And I'd also like to extend my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining our webinar today. We know that Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders don't have the same health outcomes as many other Australians do, and so we're very committed to addressing that. And indeed, we are about to launch our first Reflect Wrap, which we're very excited about. And thank you all for joining us today. The theme for World Asthma Day is Asthma Care for All. And so we've decided to highlight some aspects of our work that demonstrate what we're doing, particularly at a community level, for those that sometimes miss out on or are unable to access services that are available to all Australians. Asthma Australia's purpose is to help people breathe so they can live freely. Asthma places a huge burden on those who live with it, physically, psychologically in terms of anxiety and depression, financially in terms of the impost of medication and healthcare visits. It impacts on their ability to participate fully at school, on the sports field, in the workplace. And so our purpose is to try and change that. And our mission is to drive person-centered approaches and to influence system change. So how we put the person with asthma at the heart of everything we do and make sure that it's their insights, their needs, their experiences that are driving where we focus our efforts to try and drive better health outcomes. So today we're going to focus on a specific strategic impact pillar that we have, which is all about partnering with communities to meet unmet needs. And as I said before, some Australians are disproportionately impacted by asthma. Despite asthma impacting 1 in 9 people across our nation, some bear a larger burden of the disease. And our focus is on trying to address that. And there are so many different contributing factors to asthma. It's partly genetic, partly environmental. The quality of the homes we live in, our personal economic situation, the quality of the air we breathe, access to healthcare services, they all contribute to whether or not we can live a healthy and well life. So we are at the beginning of our program journey in this space. And over the last few years, we've kind of been experimenting in a range of different communities in a number of different states and territories to try and find a better approach to addressing the needs of those who are disproportionately impacted by asthma. What we've learned is engaging with communities requires patience. It takes time to build relationship, to build trust, to learn about and understand the nuances that exist in different communities, and to develop and test different approaches. But learn we must, because there are still way too many hospitalizations due to asthma that could be avoided. And it is a condition that should be dealt with in primary care and community. So today we're going to have 3 star members of our team sharing with you some of the experiences we've had in Western Sydney, in remote areas of South Australia, and most recently in Tasmania, in order to try and do that. So first off, I'd like to pass over to Kawsar, who will share what we're doing in Western Sydney.
Thanks, Michelle. So today I'm going to be talking about understanding our journey to better understand the needs of primary school age children with asthma. And so I'd like to start off by reading a reflection from an Arabic-speaking mother who talks about her child's experience with asthma. My daughter's asthma started very young. She was about 1 year of age when it started and was in and out of hospital when she was 4 years old. She talks about her asthma. She used to struggle with her breathing. The hospital visits were very stressful. I had to wait a long time for diagnosis. It was scary going to the hospital regularly, and she was having very high doses of Ventolin. It was very anxiety-inducing. My daughter has more control now that she is older. She can verbalize, tell me what's wrong, and knows how to use her puffer herself and knows when she needs it. She can't do many outdoor activities and will avoid the bouncy castles. She avoids running with her brother because she feels like she can't breathe. She panics when she can't breathe and needs a bit of reassurance when she's having an attack. My family is really supportive. At first, my daughter used to be embarrassed about taking her Ventolin at school, but now she has adjusted. It would be helpful to have to be able to speak to an asthma educator in those years when she couldn't be diagnosed. This story was shared with Asthma Australia as part of a project where we worked with Arabic-speaking parents with children living with asthma to learn about their child's experience with asthma. With funding from New South Wales Health, last year we worked with 4 community organisations across Western Sydney and Southwestern Sydney to hear their stories and learn about what helps their child stay well with asthma and what makes it harder for them to stay well. While I can spend a long time talking about the project and its findings, today I really wanted to focus on our journey and the tools of community-led engagement we used to get to this point, where members of the community trusted us enough to share the often emotional experience of their child living with asthma and how it defined our work moving forward and continues to define it. I would also like to thank the community for their vital contribution to the work that we do every day. Before we even reached that point, back to the beginning of the project, we wanted to ensure that we were not reinventing the wheel. We knew that there were a range of projects, data, resources, and information available that support diverse communities within this region and that support young people, some of which have been led by Asthma Australia and some have been led by other stakeholders. It was important to ensure that we reviewed some of these to help provide some context for our project and define our next steps. I won't go through all of these in detail today, but I think it's important to mention them. We started off with a review of the geographical data that helped provide a snapshot of the risks of the area in West Sydney and Southwestern Sydney and to support our decision to focus our consultations in this region. Data for both regions indicated that some of the challenges associated with accessing appropriate health services were very prevalent for people from diverse backgrounds. Asthma Australia also led the Creative Collective Solutions project in partnership with Griffith University in 2020 to hear from various members in New South Wales on how they feel we can best support young people live their best life, living with a social determinants of health lens. We thank all the community members, organisations, environmental representatives, other not-for-profits and health professionals that supported this project. We had over a few hundred stakeholders that helped inform the action map you see on the screen. In addition to this, there are many existing programs and services, and I've just got a few up on the screen that support communities in Western Sydney. These include the Jean Hales Health Education Toolkit that's available in Arabic, the Wellways Engaging Arabic-Speaking Communities Within Mental Health Services Toolkit, and the community hubs that are available in the region that provide playgroups, adult learning, and health and fitness opportunities. Asthma Australia also partnered with Agora Agency to learn how to better educate children to positively impact the way that they manage their asthma. And we partnered with Culturewell to learn about improving the health, well-being and chronic disease management of the Arabic-speaking community. There was a review of a few other research that was available as well. At this point, we were ready to engage with various health professionals working with diverse communities within the region before reaching out to the community. Some examples include a child human rights worker, a paediatrician, and a multicultural health worker. We thank their input, and some of the examples of their valuable insights include the use of an interpreter for the consultations, information about after-school activities for primary school age children that we could connect with, advice to partner with organisations that were already working with Arabic-speaking communities, and a push to speak directly with the children living with asthma. These insights were all taken on board and led to the implementation of the consultations that followed. So now we were ready to get into the community. We partnered with an organisation called Social Equity Works, who has experience in listening to the voices of the people from culturally and linguistic diverse communities in Western Sydney. Based on all the research and prior information, it was evident that we needed to connect with local community organisations that were already supporting parents from Arabic-speaking backgrounds. And that's exactly what we did. The success of the project was thanks to the partnership and support from each of the organisations listed on the screen, and each Arabic-speaking community member. We spoke to 24 women. The aim of the consultations was to learn about their child's experience with asthma so we could co-design solutions to help support them moving forward. At times, hearing from specific communities about their challenging and emotional experience with a health concern can be challenging. At this stage, we succeeded in recruiting the right organisations and the right people, and now it was time to hear their stories. The themes that came from the discussion were powerful and included some expected ideas such as asthma triggers and medication use. But it was the way in which this chronic illness inhibited these children from living freely that stood out. Kids were avoiding sports, fun activities, normal things that a kid should be spending their time doing. They were feeling anxious and their parents were feeling more anxious for them. One of their parents even indicated that no one had ever asked her about her child's experience and what they could do to help. These lived experience and ideas were a testament to the co-design principles and consultation principles that we implemented to help build that relationship with the community members. These included ongoing thanking them for their contribution. We were clear about what we wanted to achieve from the beginning. We provided ongoing clarification and reassurance to all the members that were involved. We obtained ongoing consent, provided opportunities to opt out of the consultation and skip certain questions, and we respected the privacy of all involved by maintaining anonymity. So what does this mean? Along with the review of research, data, projects, now we had these stories, these lived experiences to inform our next steps. So what did we do with the information? Now it was time for Asthma Australia to respond to the needs of the community. And that's exactly what we set out to do. We distributed Arabic resources to local GPs, pharmacies, and community organisations. These resources were developed by another Arabic-speaking community in South Australia. We developed and delivered culturally appropriate community sessions, and I still have a few of these scheduled for the next few weeks. We promoted Asthma Australia's services to the local schools within those regions, including the school health check and the staff online training package. And then we shared the findings with all involved. Asthma Australia also gained a lot from the consultation. We now had these lived experiences, this information to help inform a national youth strategy. We had insights on how to best engage with community groups, and we still learn about this every single day. Opportunities to continue working in this space and hear from the voices of people living with asthma. What about hearing from the kids living with asthma? Will their concerns be different? How are we supposed to engage with them? Who do we partner with? And will the parents consent with this? These were all the questions we thought about before we made the decision to hear the voices of young people living with asthma. We continue to partner with social equity works, utilising childhood engagement strategies to hear from young people living with asthma. We'll be utilising child human rights principles and implementing engagement through art and creativity, where students get to create an artwork that reflects their experience living with asthma. We'll be partnering with 3 schools across Western Sydney and Southwestern Sydney and hoping to speak to about 30 students to learn about their experience with asthma. And these sessions are scheduled for the next few weeks. What then? After we hear from the kids and we've got the voices of the parents, we're collating all of the findings from all of the engagements along with all the research prior to that. And we're hoping to define some of our next steps. And these include forming a local strategy of engagement, utilising child human rights, empowerment principles that are informed by listening to the community members, the kids and the parents. Forming a resource suitable for diverse communities based on these findings. Going back to the kids and other kids and co-designing a resource for the kids by the kids next year. Informing an umbrella youth strategy at Asthma Australia and defining how we work moving forward, adjusting our normal ways of working in this space. Be thinking about ways to ensure that the solutions and services we offer are long-standing and efficient beyond the current funding, and searching for further funding to develop other supportive resources for children, further empowering their voices to learn more about their experiences with asthma and respond to this. So I'll leave you with watch this space as we gain more insights directly from children living with asthma, and I will pass on to Michelle.
Thank you, Kawsar. Something's not right. No, that's not working. Is it sharing?
Yes, that's sharing now.
Oh, good. In the presentation mode?
Correct.
Cool. Thank you. Great. Hi, my name is Michelle Davis, and I'm going to talk to you about how we've been learning to listen. As Kawsar said, we're listening to the community. This is a new way of working, responding to what the community needs. I'm going to talk to you in relation to the Mid-North and Yorke Peninsula projects that we've been running in South Australia. And the reason why I'm talking to you about them is because through this, we've been learning that this is in fact the way to provide asthma care for all. So we've been, as Kawsar said, we've been trying to use our learnings and putting them back into working with the community. So in Adelaide, I worked with culturally and linguistically diverse community members, Vietnamese and Arabic speakers, and also worked on another project called Culture Well, in which we worked with Arabic speakers and pharmacists, and that was in Adelaide and Brisbane. So those learnings from those projects we fed back into what is now Kawsar's project in Western Sydney. We've also been using learnings from our experience in other projects, but also from research, what's already known about things. Identifying, talking and listening to the community, they're telling us where the gaps are, and then looking to find out where's the knowledge already and how can we package it up in a way that makes sense to the community. So in doing some of that, in working extensively with the Mid-North community, we actually, they identified that they wanted somebody called the Asthma Community Connector. We worked with them, changed around a model until we eventually landed on something that works for the Mid-North community. And now we've taken that model to the Southern Yorke Peninsula, and it will probably be taken to Tasmania, and Jess will talk about that in her presentation. So what we're trying to do is listen to the community and learn our learnings and bring them back. And why is that important? Well, because what we've seen is the outcomes are good. What we've seen and heard is, and that's through evaluations and feedback, is that people breathe better when they are seen and heard. They breathe better when there's a shared language. For instance, what we found was that we were talking about asthma, whereas people talk about when they have breathing difficulties, when they want to breathe better. So we understood that we actually needed to change our language and talk in terms that the consumers talk in. So people breathe better when they're more confident to manage their breathlessness, when they feel empowered to ask questions of their doctors and other healthcare professionals, when they know the next steps or what the options are for them. And what we've seen in working with the community and delivering what they identified as what they needed, their very own Asthma Community Connector, who is one of them, their partnership with this person has enabled them to achieve a lot more with their asthma than what they thought was possible. So here's the project team for the Mid-North, and I've just put a map there of South Australia. As you can see, the Mid-North is, we worked in Peterborough, in Jamestown and Orroroo, and the Yorke Peninsula, where the model has now been taken to in the last year. We're working in the Southern Yorke Peninsula, and the Yorke Peninsula is that boot there. So the Mid-North community identified that they needed a person to work with them who had lived experience of asthma, who could help them, work with them and manage their asthma, but also to navigate the barriers. And one of the reasons why was because they would understand and know what the barriers were too. We also heard that there's a lot of stigma around asthma. And so Asthma Australia, for Asthma Week last year, talked about stigma. brought it out into the open and heard what the consumers had to say about that and what it was like living with that. We also have learned that people living in rural and remote areas, people who come from cool community backgrounds, they all have particular barriers pertinent to their situations. But really what we've learned is that the barriers that they have are often common to many groups and in accessing the healthcare system. So that was a big learning for us, that if we listen to the community, then we will be eventually reaching a broader audience if we respond to what they need. Part of listening to the community was actually listening to ourselves talk about lived experience being expertise, but then we had to understand that we needed to do it differently. We needed to work in different ways if, in fact, we were going to work privileging lived experience as expertise. And the Mid-North community, I'd like just to take a moment in recognising the value of their generosity in sharing their stories, of their patience in working with us while we tried to understand what it was that they were telling us, and that we went back with them to them with various iterations of what we thought we understood, and they patiently stepped us through what it is exactly it meant to listen to the community and respond to their needs. And having done that, the Mid-North community's reach is a lot further than anyone could ever have imagined, because it's now the Asthma Community Connector is now in the Yorke Peninsula. We're thinking about bringing a model to Tasmania, and it may go beyond. So it started in the Mid-North, and it's important to recognise the value of the Mid-North community and what they shared with us, because they've allowed Asthma Australia to change the way it's working. In acknowledging also the lived experience expertise, we had to recognise that our role was not leading out the front, but instead was behind, in the back seat, supporting the Asthma Community Connector and supporting the communities. And this, in some ways, was a really difficult learning for us. So here is an Asthma Community Connector. Here's Kerry. She's been working on the Yorke Peninsula for nearly a year now, and she's going to talk about one of her many experiences in working differently and listening to the community and responding to where they're at on their asthma journey. So the impact in the Mid-North has been varied and great. The Asthma Community Connector is Anita, and she has been able to give us insights about what it's like for people in the Mid-North to live with asthma. Here's Bob, who will talk about what it is that he needs in relation to technical difficulties. So what he's explaining is how he needs to navigate all these different barriers. And the difference has been that Anita has been at his side, either working out how to negotiate them or going in together or going in separately in dealing with these barriers, or simply just being there. This has been a different way of working for us, and it's meant that listening to the community has also led us to thinking about how we can bring together other things that are in our toolbox. So Diane is another community member, and what she speaks to is how, in working together with Anita, she's felt firstly validated and empowered as a consumer, because she says that what made a difference and what made her feel confident to go back to the doctor against what they often made her feel was, as a parent or a carer, is just neurotic. She said instead of, she had Anita by her side, or the sense of her being behind her, that she had the courage to go back and fight once again for her child. And this is because she's being listened to. So these new ways of working and thinking about bringing people together is a different way of approaching things. But how do we think about going from pilot to business as usual? Because these were all pilots. Well, as you can see, we're at the beginning of this journey, but what we have seen is that the outcomes are different. So if we start listening to the community more and responding to their needs and what they're telling us, people on the ground, then in fact, we really might be able to start delivering asthma care for all. So these new ways of working have included, we had a workshop for healthcare professionals, and this is a quote from one of the healthcare professionals who spoke to me about the fact that before, when she was interacting with her patients, she would consider their symptoms in isolation. However, in doing the work of the breathlessness workshop, for her it was a real light bulb moment, because in doing that, there was an exercise that they went through, and she said, all of a sudden, I actually understood and realised and experienced what it was like to be without breath, to be breathless. And she said, I realised that it's actually really scary, and it made me feel quite fearful. So she said, now that's actually changed the way she goes about her practice, because she has a lot more empathy, she said, and she feels like she's working alongside her patients rather than, not necessarily opposite ends, but certainly not in the same space. And she said now she's been getting some feedback from patients who said that they feel as if she understands. And she had a bit of a chuckle and said, well, she understands now. She certainly understands a lot more, she feels, than what she understood before. So what we heard, there are high rates of breathlessness. What we heard is that people are not knowing what to do, they're not being heard themselves, that there's no effective support, at least that's the way they experience it, and people feel alone, they feel misunderstood, they feel judged. And all of that, of course, makes them feel helpless in relation to how they go about living better with their asthma. But instead, listening to the community and listening to people on the ground, the community connectors are able to give peer-to-peer support. They're able to listen, they're able to partner, they share their own lived experience, and that means that they're actually easier to talk to, particularly in light of the fact that what we found was there's stigma in the community. She advocates for and with the community members, and in doing so, she also empowers them. So where's Asthma Australia's role in this? Well, what we learned is we needed to step back and instead support the asthma community connectors and support the community. We didn't need to be out front, but what we do need to do is look in our toolbox, and which includes people that we know, people who are working on the ground, research that's already been done, and make changes to the systems which don't work for the people living with asthma. Because if we listen to them, they'll tell us which parts don't work well for them. So, of course, we need to listen to communities ongoing, and we need to keep checking back with them to hear and find out and understand about their needs if we're going to spread asthma care to all. So what I'm going to do now is hand you over to Jess, who's going to talk more about how we're bringing the asthma community connector model perhaps into Tasmania.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi everyone, I'm the Tasmanian Coordinator for Asthma Australia. And what I wanted to do today was talk to you about the approach we've used to bring the success of Michelle's work in South Australia to Tasmania, and to iterate the pilot into its next phase of being. And in looking at how we might do that, I was encouraged by the team to think of what's the first step we need to take if we were going to do this work in Tasmania. So in unpacking what happened in South Australia, it became clear that the initial community in the mid-north area of South Australia was a site that was chosen by the funding organisation as one needing attention. Yet if we were to bring that to Tasmania and we were to approach a funder or initiate a project, how would we choose a community? And that became a really central question for me that's lasted all the way through developing the project architecture, is how would we go about choosing a community? So there were some structures that I used to think about it. Was what was the architecture of the project? What are the bits we need to replicate? What was a rubric to look at how we can choose that community? Where would we invest our time? Where would we get listened to by the community? Where could we get them to trust us? And where could we get the greatest impact? And identifying that rubric has taken quite a lot of intellectualizing. It's been a lot of fun. And then landing the model and codifying it, which I guess is startup speak for, how does the model work and how can we give it another spin in a new context? And this all needed to be done against a backdrop of understanding that social determinants is a lens that we have to see health through. People don't live in a health condition, they live in families, in societies, and interact with different parts of society, and they all bring something to bear on the health journey. So I guess a key moment of learning in the trajectory of mapping this project out was what were the critical success factors for something like Mid-North and Yorks to come to Tassie. And the ones that I kept coming back to was what Michelle's been speaking about, is discovery through listening. So taking a back seat and letting people come to the front and privileging the lived experience. And also supporting the asthma community connector. So Asthma Australia's role in legitimising that person's position in the community, and giving Asthma Australia agency in that community. And that organisationally we needed to develop some critical success behaviours, and they were being open to learning, listening, being a trustworthy partner, trusting the person that we're talking to, and being honest about our dialogue. It's going to have to move. There we go. So we could start with the prevalence and hospitalisations data, but that's only a very one-dimensional picture of asthma in Tasmania. There are other characteristics and determinants that play a more significant role in how we could design asthma management programs in Tasmania. And the critical question for me was, what's life like with asthma in Tasmania? And this was a question that was posed in Mid-North originally, and I've translated that across into Tasmania so that we can understand the community experience of asthma in Tasmania and compare and contrast it with South Australia and New South Wales, and understand what is it about asthma in Tasmania that we need to address. So we need to look at the gaps and look at the problems and the potential solutions. And we want to look at the needs of Tasmanians and the problems we need to solve in partnership with the community. We can't do this without the community. That's one of the top essential learnings from the Mid-North project. And then for the project, we wanted to define which population, according to our rubric and our architecture, would be ready for something like Mid-North to be delivered in the Tasmanian context. So the idea wasn't to go out and decide whether an asthma community connector was something that would be supported. We're taking a punt and saying, yes, it is, and where and how would that look in Tasmania? So we've designed a project that's got multiple streams. There's the desktop research, which always has to be done. We do need to collect the available data and information and map asthma and services and supports in Tasmania, because that hasn't been done before. And then at the very, I guess, simple end of the scale is to do a consumer survey, which we're promoting widely across the state, to talk to people about their views. And I'll come back to that again in a minute. We're also conducting stakeholder interviews with people who are well positioned to give us their reflections on the asthma journey as well as the health system journey, and give us insights into what they understand people they talk to want to talk about. And then we're going to dive into 3 focus groups in 3 locations where we've applied our rubric in a preliminary sense. We're picking areas of the state where certain demographics and certain issues are present to test out some of our ideas based on the Mid-North project. So I hope you can read this. The critical to me, and it's something I've been passionate about because I learned this from Mid-North, is that you have to go where the people are, and sometimes they're not always where you expect them to be. So while we can do an asthma survey online, it was really important to me that we provided people with other avenues of support. So we provided a 15-minute survey online, but we also invited people to answer a free text question, what is life like for you with asthma in Tasmania? So that people could vent and get it off their chests and talk in a more open manner. We also set up a dedicated phone line so that people could text me and I could ring them back so that I could pay for the data in the phone call, because for many people, data and phone access is an issue. And the final component was to put reply paid envelopes across community touchpoints so that people could write their thoughts on an envelope, on a reply paid postcard, and post it back to me free of charge, and we could hear from them that way. So it's been a very large communication exercise. We've promoted it across every channel we can possibly think of, and I have a huge stakeholder database that I've sent nudges of information through. But we've soft launched the website. We've done a specific Tasmanian edition of our newsletter called On Air. We've advertised across all of the community newspapers, which goes to everything from a small photocopy job to something that's more professional across the communities. We've done interviews on local radio. We're planning a media launch shortly. We've sent advisories to stakeholder gateway organisations. So they may be community health centres, they might be the Tasmanian Council of Social Services, they might be health partnerships. We've got posters and the postcards across the community, and as you'd expect, loads of socials. Very early on in the process, our first respondent was to that email question, what's life like for you with asthma in Tasmania? And this person wrote me a long email, which was extremely emotional and very moving. But I've just grabbed here this woman's thoughts about really enjoying the option to communicate openly and to have a space to write everything down. She felt boxed in by a survey and wanted to just vent. And we ended up talking on the phone for a while, and she ended up engaging with our asthma educators, which has been life-changing for her. And she also did the survey anyway because I asked her to. But she really wanted to really vent, and giving her the opportunity was something she really relished. So what's next is that we will adapt, improvise and accomplish. We're going to take our learnings from what we discover from people living with asthma in Tasmania, and that's someone with asthma or someone caring for someone with asthma, and we'll respond and adjust and develop bespoke approaches that are community-led and that are designed by communities for communities. And this will be very much informed by projects like Michelle and Kawsar's, where we can find tailored solutions to suit areas where the greatest unmet needs are present. Some of the surprises we're getting along the way is we're discovering people with hidden talents. I'm hearing every day from people who just want to know how they can help, what they can do, how can they be involved and how can they support us. I wasn't expecting that, and it's been absolutely delightful to uncover all this nascent enthusiasm out there for helping people live with asthma. We're also developing proximity communities that we want to work in. So there are people from communities that are saying, I think my neighbourhood could get onto something for you. And so we're building connections to new stakeholders. And we're also unearthing new approaches. People are giving us advice and support on how we could frame up new responses to challenges of asthma in a local area. So thank you. It's been great to explain how the trajectory of Mid-North and Yorks could be coming to Tasmania, and it's likely it will. The project's still ongoing. The survey will conclude at the end of June. The focus groups in the townships we've identified will finish at the end of September. So thank you for your time, and I'd like to let you know that if you're interested in any of these projects, you can reach out to us on those emails on your screen now. I'll leave it up for a moment for you to take down, and we can talk to you further about the work that we're doing in bringing asthma care to all. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Kawsar, Michelle and Jess. It's so wonderful to hear you speak so passionately about your projects and how you're listening to the community and really responding to their needs. So now I'd like to open the floor to any questions that anyone may have. You're welcome to put these directly into the Q&A chat, or please feel free to raise your hand and ask them in person if you prefer.
We're also happy to invite you to share any examples or connections that you may have either now or later with us. As you've heard from the team, building connections and relationships is an ongoing and evolving journey. But if there's no questions, I would just like to acknowledge some of our visitors in the room today. I noticed, Senator Polly, that you've joined us from Tasmania, so lovely to see you. And you have a question or a comment?
Yes, if I may, just thank you all very much for your presentations. And unfortunately, as Jess knows, we have a large cohort of people who have experience with asthma in their families. But I was speaking to someone recently about juvenile arthritis and the lack of support within the education system and from teachers. And asthma was actually held up as a great example of how you've managed to educate teachers to have a better understanding of, the needs of children at school. And I just want to, take my hat off to you for what you've been able to achieve in that area. And I've taken that on as one of the things I want to achieve so that, young children with arthritis actually get that same support in the classroom. So big shout out to everyone. And again, as for today, and I'm very interested in what's happening in the campaigns that we're doing in Tassie. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for joining that. I'm sure Jess would be more than happy to meet with the team at Arthritis and to share some of those learnings. And I'd like to acknowledge we've also got someone from the Department of Health here with us who have funded that program over many years, which has allowed it to go from strength to strength. So as they say, it takes a community. But thank you everyone for joining us. I think today was really about focusing on the different ways that we're taking to engage with the community to make sure we are hearing from all voices, especially those that we may not have heard from previously and who are bearing a disproportionate burden with their asthma. We also believe that tailored approaches are needed and that the people who are best placed to identify new approaches and new solutions are those who are bearing the brunt of existing approaches that just aren't working effectively with them, those living in the community and those who are supporting them. So as I hope the presentations have showed you, this approach definitely has promise. It does take time and require patience, but it certainly is very promising and delivering some very exciting outcomes in terms of new approaches that we might not have been able to envisage ourselves. So it's a different path, it's evolving, and we couldn't do it without the support of all our partners. And I'd just like to thank you all for coming today, and just wish you a happy World Asthma Day. So thanks for joining, and have a lovely afternoon.